Hey guys, Legendary Life Media Podcast. We're here for another episode. Got a few topics that we want to talk about. Interesting times. It is the day after the inauguration. Not sure the guys really want to talk about that. I had to slip it in there just in case they didn't let me. But moving forward, we're going to talk a little bit about dating. We're going to talk a little bit about social skills, talk about how to make good impressions, just kind of like general stuff, also through the lens of storytelling. I'll probably make an ass of myself. Don't worry, I'm pretty good at that. And we'll just have some fun here. Thanks for joining us. All right, so any thoughts on the inauguration? You just want to skip ahead?
Well, I think me and Josh kind of did a separate conversation on that.
I will say, love the memes. The memes have been great. Memes
Great
have been
memes.
fire. Any of you Reddit warriors or ex-warriors out there cranking out the memes, you're doing great. I just want to show my respect to that community. They're doing the good work out there, doing the Lord's work.
Fair. I just want to know, yes or no, did Melania Trump look like the Hamburglar with that hat?
Honestly, yeah.
Fucking crazy.
Looked like the Hamburglar. There were some people in there who looked like Grimace. I'm going to be real. I think the whole lineup was kind of there, but definitely Melania. I didn't recognize her right away. And I saw it and I was like, I guess that is Melania. So.
My take was a little bit more of the, Smooth Criminal from the Michael Jackson video. Yeah.
But
What the hell was that?
I think it's Michael Jackson, dog. But here's the thing, is what's actually kind of funny to me, I was actually thinking about this while I was watching the inauguration, is kind of like what the dynamic must be if you are like the first lady. And like one day, we're gonna have probably a female president, and then we're gonna have the first gentleman, or whatever he's gonna be called. And I think that's just an interesting way to think about relationship dynamics, right? Like, how do you properly handle a relationship when one person is clearly of such a higher social order hierarchy than the other person in terms of just sheer influence? Because, I mean, there's always probably a little bit of that, not everyone's always going to be the exact same level of social status or the same level of success as their other partner. But I think it is pretty interesting when there's that big of a disparity, right? Like, what do you do when your husband or your wife is the president of the country? Like, how do you handle that dynamic?
Isn't that a typical, isn't that kind of a typical element of a good dating dynamic, that there is a disparity? That's what actually creates the value? That the relationship exists because there's some sort of disparity in value?
I think yes, but I don't think it necessarily has to be a disparity in like absolute value. It's just value in different areas,
Perceived value.
Because one person probably has quote unquote value in one area and less than others, and the other partner probably has a lot of value in one area and less than others. And like, I think the idea or the ideal is that you'll fit together kind of like a jigsaw puzzle in that sense, right?
100%.
Where you make up for, you complement for each other's strengths and weaknesses. So, but again, like, how does that play out if you're, the spouse of the president? Like, how do you fit in there?
I don't know. I mean, I think there's pretty good history of it. To your point, for the dynamic of like the man being the one in power, and like the woman being the wife or the first lady or the queen or whatever. There's a lot of instances of that because the world for forever has had men as kings, like back to if you believe in the Bible, back to the Bible, like King David, like Bathsheba was the wife of one of his soldiers who wound up like with the king of the entire kingdom. Mm-hmm. So it's like there's always kind of been that disparity, but where it's interesting what he talks about, what you're talking about, is like when you have that disparity, but it's the opposite, and it's the woman who's in power. Because traditionally, in order for a woman to be attracted to a man, women are very hypergamous, meaning that they want to date someone who's equal or greater on the social hierarchy than them. But if they are the ones that are higher on the social hierarchy, yes, they've been elevated to the position because they weren't the president their whole life. They have a pre-existing relationship. But I do wonder what that does to like the psychological attraction for a girl towards her man when she's literally more powerful than him and more powerful than any person on planet Earth.
Yeah. Brandon, do you have any thoughts on that?
I mean, I don't think it's unpopular opinion maybe, but it's just not a natural balance, right? Not to say that it won't happen, because obviously we have a lot of things in the world and in the evolution of human history that's completely out of natural balance. But yeah, I think that's part of what we see in the evolution of our timeline, right? Is that like natural balance going far out of natural balance? It's like a pendulum swing, and then, and then it's like, hey, wait a second, things aren't right here, and now it's a pendulum swing back to like, natural order. The perfect example of that is in nature. There's this like concept, right? It has to do with like ants in nature. So they don't work that hard, but they're always getting something done. So they're always working, and they're always working to restore that natural order. And the nature kind of works that way too. Mm-hmm. Is that whenever there's an imbalance, like the wildfires, for example, like whenever there's an imbalance, this is historic with fires. It's extreme damage to the ecosystem. It creates this huge pendulum swing to one side of like damage effect. But then the outcome of that is new life comes in, and that eventually nature starts to the trees start to regrow, and nature starts to restore itself. So yeah, I think that, with that example, it is taking us out of balance of nature, because like Peter said, yeah, historically, like the men are kings, right? The kings are the rulers. And for those who would say that, that's now it's misogynistic, or it's, there's some other term or some other like feeling-based emotional merit that comes up about, well, to say anything less of a woman president. Great, if we get a woman president, good for her. Like, but to that point, yeah, that the relationship dynamic, I think, would be unnatural.
Right. No, I just love talking about this one because it's just such an extreme example, right?
Correct.
Like, it's one thing if, yeah, there's a married couple and, the man makes 150 a year and the woman makes 200 a year, what's the, that's probably a more realistic example of there being a disparity, right? But when you're talking about, if Tulsi Gabbard maybe one day becomes president, not that I'm like necessarily a huge fan of her, it's not like an endorsement, but I, in terms of what's likely, like she's pretty popular. So if there was going to be a first female president, that might be who it is. And like if she becomes president, like she has a husband, I don't know what his name is, but like she has a husband and he'll become the first male equivalent of the first lady. I think that'll be really interesting, both in terms of like observing the relationship dynamic, but also like the societal dynamic too, right?
Oh, yeah.
Because I'm just curious to see how the world like responds to, because I feel like first ladies generally have like this interesting role where like the president's in place and the first lady has usually covers like social issues, right? Like I know Michelle Obama was big on like pushing like healthy eating. I believe Melania does like educational stuff. I'm not too familiar with it.
She was cyberbullying.
Cyberbullying. Okay.
Yeah, Michelle Obama was Get Out and Move. Originally she was Food, but then she switched to like Get Out and Move.
Got it.
Also,
yeah.
Let me say one thing to save face too, which is that the Tulsi Gabbard example, right? So say Tulsi Gabbard's a career politician. She really aspires to be president, and her husband is just like, some CEO or business owner or something like that. That doesn't necessarily mean that there's a disparity just because of their duties or their roles. Mm-hmm. And if she aspired to be president, she became president, like, good for her. Yeah, I just think in the context of dating, that creates an interesting dynamic, because obviously being the president has that perception of being somebody who's like in a position of power.
Oh, of course.
Yeah. Well, different example, but an interesting example actually, and it's making me think of it because he sent me this Cody Sanchez video today. So Cody Sanchez, entrepreneur, she's like super successful woman, and so she's married. She makes an obscene more amount of money than her husband, and you know who her husband is? A former Navy SEAL. So it's like, here's this super high earning, super successful, super incredible like woman who would like be above any other guy, and then she found a guy who used to go to war with his friends in the most masculine possible way to like balance her out, but almost like kind of out alpha her in a way to put him back up here in the relationship. So it's like,
it's
interesting how those dynamics all seem to like work out. But to your point with president, you can't go above president. You're like, well, I'm the one that commands SEAL Team 6 and the largest nuclear arsenal in the world. So there's
right. I think that also kind of brings it into an interesting dynamic in terms of dating as well, because there is like the power dynamic in terms of materially or externally each partner holds, but then there's also, I guess you could call it an energetic, Brandon might give me some trash for talking about energy because I'm pretty skeptical of energies usually.
Listen, I saw you bring your crystals today, bro. Why are you lying?
I know I have them hidden, but you don't want to know where I hid it, guys. But
Yeah, definitely.
I do think it's interesting to observe the difference between the status disparity versus like the disparity in terms of psychological / energetic relational dynamic between the two people, right? Because maybe the woman is in a more external position of power. Maybe she's the CEO of a company. Maybe she's the president. Maybe she's some other kind of, she's killing it in some area. Maybe externally less of a status figure, but within the context of the relationship, he still holds kind of the grounding energy, right? Like,
Totally.
and I think that might, like, to me, I actually personally believe that's way more important within the context of a relationship than like how much money either of them makes or how much power either of them has. This is my personal opinion, is people focus a little too much on that. I think what really it's about is the way that they're able to basically hold the energy and the energy dynamic within the relationship that has absolutely nothing to do with how much money that they make. The status they have or the money they make might be an indicator of, okay, if you're the kind of person who has a more dominant energy, you're more likely to be successful in life. Not a blanket rule. There's plenty of dominant guys who have not successful lives. There's a place for them. It's called jail. But like I think as a general like 80% rule, that could be the case. So I think basically what I'm saying with that ultimately is if you're the husband of the president and the relationship is going well, that must mean you have some major confidence. You probably have some major strong internal beliefs that are keeping you the grounding energy even for a woman that is the president. I think that's pretty crazy.
Yeah.
Speaking of relationship dynamics, I just want to talk about like what's the craziest like online app dating experience you had? Like where you met somebody off of like a dating app or something.
I have a story, but
like where like but maybe not necessarily crazy, but like where you thought it went good and then something went bad, or like
I
something.
definitely have a story.
Yeah.
But Peter, do you have one? I feel like you have probably even better one than me.
I mean, mine, this is like, so you found a way to like bring up a thing that is potentially one of my most normal stories that I have, period. So I think I'm just gonna let Josh take
Let's
this
let
one.
Josh take it.
No, okay, I can. So here's the story. I matched with this girl on Bumble. This was about probably a little over half a year ago. So
This is a professional bumbler.
Yeah, the bumbling was happening, and this was the pre-update of Bumble, back when Bumble was still Bumble, and like the girls actually.
When the girl had to text you "Hey" with 3 Y's.
Yeah.
First, in order to talk to you.
Which
Put
hey,
in all
counted
that
for
effort.
something these days. Now the effort's out the window. Now they just have prompts, but Hinge has always had prompts. So what the heck? But anyways, enough of my rant on Bumble. But I matched with her on Bumble back, in the golden age of Bumble. And at first everything was fine. We matched, we do some chatting, we hop on a call, like everything, the vibe seemed good.
It's
And
like a job interview.
I invite her to, that's what it is really. And I invite her to get like a bottle and board at Postino, which is like a really popular like wine bar out here in Phoenix. And I'm sure there are other places too. And we go, it's going well. And here's the thing, the date's going well. Like all of like the indicators of like good flirtation, like the vibe is there, we're feeling each other. She's like crossing her legs with my legs underneath the table. Things are going well. And everything changed when the bill came. Okay? Because when the bill came, it came down, and this is what I normally do on dates. Like, I'll tell a girl, like, hey, we can split it or I can cover it. I don't know what kind of girl you are, but, like, just let me know. And a lot of times, they'll be like, no, we'll split it. Like, it's usually what happens. Or she'll be like, you can cover it, and then I'm happy to cover it. It's usually a cheap date. I'm just probably not going to talk to her again.
What's your theory of doing that? Because that goes against conventional wisdom.
How does it go against conventional wisdom?
Because if you're the man and you're taking a woman on a date, you should pay.
I don't think that's conventional wisdom.
I mean, it's pretty conventional to me, right? I mean, like, it depends on the nature of the date, right? Like, it depends on the frame of why you're going on the date. Is it just like a fun date to meet, or is it like a date?
Well, I met her on a dating app and we talked, and I was like, hey, it'd be cool to meet up and go out to grab some food, right? So, yeah, to me, we live in the 21st century. I think, girls have jobs, they make money, whatever. But, yeah, so we go out, and then, but it's interesting you bring
Yeah,
that
we
up.
could table that.
Yeah, we can
So,
table that.
but here's the thing. She says like, no, we can split it. I'm like, okay, cool. So we split it, right? And it's a cheap meal, by the way. It's a $20 meal for like everything.
Four and a bottle of Postino is like $30.
Yeah.
And this is $25. This is not like
Yeah.
Yeah,
8 years
to
ago,
me, that's kind of petty,
$30.
where it's just like $30 here to cover it.
Yeah, well, they have it's actually $20 because they have a special on Mondays.
Yeah, I thought it was 30. It's actually 20, so it's even less.
Yeah, Video Pastino. But they're normally great.
Yeah, keep it up.
But in this instance, okay, so we get the check. We're like, cool, like we both split it. You know, and it's also to me a kind of a test on the personality type of the girl too, right? Because to me, like, I would, if I'm gonna get in a relationship with a girl, I would rather her be the type who's willing to split. That's my personal preference. Until maybe there's always going to be different circumstances,
but solely for the purpose of getting some investment, right? Like,
I suppose. Yeah, I'm not necessarily thinking about it that deeply. Yeah, I trust that she'll be into me regardless of if she likes me. Then she'll like me regardless of if I pay or if we both split.
So you brought it up and some weird dynamic occurred.
So yeah, well, everything, I didn't even realize anything was off until later after that. But she later said that was the moment that messed it all up. So like, we split it. Everything seems good. We walk out. Everything kind of falls apart after that because she literally goes into like psycho mode, and I don't mean like psycho mode in the sense of like she's like overreacting, like not like the douchebag way of saying psycho, just because the girl's like acting in a way that he doesn't like. I'm talking about like actual like straight up mentally ill behavior where she like out of nowhere is like she goes like, "You want to race me back to the car?" And I was like, I want to rate. And I thought, like, at first, she was like, okay, she's just being kind of cute and quirky, whatever. She said, cool. And then she's like, okay, let's go. And then she, like, literally goes into full sprints. And then I'm like, okay. So I kind of follow her, trying not to look like I'm chasing her, but, like, I'm kind of just playfully jogging on beside her. And she literally, like, stops halfway. And she's, like, a fit girl, by the way. She's, like, 5. She's, like, kind of short, but she's, like, thin. She seems athletic. She, like, stops halfway through. She starts, like, panicking. She's like, I'm hyperventilating. And she's like, I think I need to go to the hospital. And I was like, what the fuck? And she's like, actually, never mind. And she like starts running again, and I'm like, what the hell? And then she gets back, and then we like get back to the car, and then she like tries to like block me off from getting to the car because at the time I lived right next to Postino, and she like picked me up, and we like both went there, but I live walking distance to it, so I was asking her to drop me back off basically. And so we get back to her car, and she like stops at, like basically like stops there. Like refuses to get in the car. She like starts like chatting me up again about like something random, like before we even get in the car. Then out of nowhere, she's like, just by the way, I mean, I think the way that you split the bill was pretty shitty. And I'm like, well, I mean, I asked you. I offered to pay it if you prefer me to pay, but like, you volunteered to pay for half of it. You're like, no, it's fine. I'll pay for half of it. And she's like, yeah, well, we're saying a bunch of weird stuff. And then she starts saying, like, by the way, like, I also don't think this would work because I have 6 kids. And I'm like, this girl's like 23. Like, I can tell just from looking at her that she doesn't have, like, you know, nothing like making any big statements about this, but like if a woman has 6 kids, like she's not gonna have the kind of body that this girl had. Like, you know what I mean? Like you can tell she's like still young. She still is like, you know, she has like that kind of look where I'm like, you obviously haven't had kids yet. You definitely haven't had 6 kids, and so she's obviously just like making wild stuff up. And like she gives me the ride back. I find out she drank on the way there too. She's like, she like had a cup. She was like, by the way, like this is a cocktail that I made. I'm like, wait, you drank that on the way here? So she was already like drunk like when she got to the place apparently. She drops me off, and then she's like, I go out the car, like I get out of the car, and she like leaves her car too. She leaves the car parked in like the middle of the driveway. She's not even in a parking space of like my apartment complex. She's like right in the middle of it. Leaves her car there. She's like follows me like almost to my door. She's like talking other like mad crazy shit. And then she eventually like leaves and was like yelled something about me like leaning on her car, and that's why it didn't work. Like she was just like making random stuff up the entire time. And what stands out to me is that she only started acting that weird and erratically after like the moment where like the bill came, basically.
Yeah. Well, so two things that are really sticking out to me that are interesting. Sorry,
Go
you didn't have to finish, but yeah. So the first thing is obviously it's interesting that you brought up this idea. Hey, would you like to split the bill? Otherwise, if it's a big deal, I can cover it. So you made that offer, but I think just the fact that you brought up splitting the bill, trigger, right? Major trigger. For me, so like I have different like opinions on that, right? So it's like, okay, you're doing it as a test for yourself to see like, okay, is she cool or is she crazy about money?
Yeah.
Right, where she's just like, you know, yeah, there are girls who will just go on dates to get a free meal or whatever and don't give 2 shits. But at the same time, then there's what you're describing where she's like doing all this erratic and crazy behavior to kind of like you did something she didn't like, or in her mind she didn't like it, so she started like doing whatever she could to basically like throw the date or bomb it, right? And I don't know.
Yeah.
That's an interesting story.
I mean, I don't know. I just think that gotta say I don't dislike your strategy because I feel like you just scrambled that egg quicker than it was gonna scramble anyway.
Interesting.
Right? So you basically the way that I would like to characterize this is if you've ever seen like the mine sweeping attachment for the M1 Abrams, it's like basically it's like a giant metal plow that you would see on the front of like a bulldozer, and then it's a big drum with a bunch of maces on it that pound the dirt and basically blow up mines on like mine streets before like an armored personnel carrier or Humvee goes over and it can kill someone.
Yeah.
So basically you did that.
Yeah, you're basically you're testing for
you
landmines.
were using the mine flail. You blew it up before it ever got to you. So to me, I'm like, I can't say I disagree with the strategy because you might have saved yourself a lot of pain on the back end.
Yeah.
So I understand
it's
it.
kind of a double-edged sword, you know,
Yeah.
because like
You might weed out good women doing that, but you
Yeah.
might weed out a lot of bad ones. I don't know that I would quite do that, but I would go like halfway there. But I think for me, I would just like, well, I probably wouldn't have taken her for food. I probably would have just gone for drinks, seen on board a bottle.
Yeah.
I think I would just pay for it, but I wouldn't say anything. But I would watch how she acted about me paying for it because I think that's what would tell me something too. Is like, at least the way I would do it is I would just pay for it, but I would watch to see if she tried to like look at the bill or like stop me or like offer to pay or like reach for her wallet or like put her card on the thing, rather than like overtly say it. But your strategy is pretty much the same as mine in this scenario. I just don't overtly say it. I kind of like more covertly say it. So I tend to be more on your side. My default is to pay. But I more agree with you. I just don't think that I'm like overt and ballsy enough to say it in that manner.
Well, I should clarify the way I say it because I don't actually say, for the sake of the story, I was just kind of saying
Yeah.
like what I actually say in that situation is, so are you like the traditional type or are you the modern type basically? I kind of just ask a girl that before I even like say anything about money. I just ask her that.
Yeah.
And then like if she says the traditional type, then I'll usually just pay for it.
Yeah.
And if she says like the modern type or anything that's kind of hinting towards that, then I'll be like, okay, let's split the bill, right? Because to me, I think that's like kind of way to number one.
It's a tell on the mindset.
It's definitely a tell. So that's what I did, and she was like, yeah, like I'm on it, and then like that's when I did it. So
Interesting.
that's usually what I do, and I feel like that's fair.
Yeah. No, I agree. I'm just saying my default is to pay, but I don't disagree with your mentality either. Like, I'm kind of like somewhere in the middle. I'm kind of somewhere between you and Brandon in that my thing is, my default is to pay. I do think I should, so I do, but I pay a lot of attention to how she acts about it. Brandon's almost like, you know, you just pay and you don't care because that's the job, and you're almost like, why should I pay? It's 25. And like I said, I see both sides of it. I tend to agree with your mentality, and I just tend to take more of like the Brandon course of action while watching. But that did remind me of one thing. So I'll briefly tell the story before we get out of here, but I have a more extreme version. It actually worked out for me though, of what happened with Josh, but it was totally of my own creation. So it was actually my ex-girlfriend, one of the only few real girlfriends I've had in my life. So I met her, I had like 3. So I met her on, it was either Bumble or Hinge. I think it was Hinge. So I meet her on Hinge, and I decide for our second date, I'm gonna take her on a hike. Mind you, it's Arizona in the summer. It's July, and I'm taking her to Piascoa Peak, which is like the second hardest hike in Arizona. That of that length, like the only harder one is, well, okay, if you subdivide Camelback, Echo, and Cholla, but if you just term it like Camelback, it's almost as hard as Camelback, but not quite. So I decided I'm gonna take her there in the summer. So we're gonna go early in the morning. This is like our second date. And I decided I was gonna take her there as like a screener to see if she was cool. Like on purpose. Just to be like, let's see how this girl does at 6 a.m. when it's the summer and it's like 105, 110 degrees out. Like I'll make sure I have enough water. I know she's in good shape. I know she can do it. I know she hikes. So that's not an issue there. And so I took her on the hike. And she almost threw up like 3 times, but she would not quit. So I knew she was a fucking G. She like wouldn't let me help her. She would not quit. She made it to the top, and then like months later, she told me, she was like, I can't believe you took me out hiking in the heat on our second date. She's like, I hated you so much. You don't even know. And I was like,
That's pretty messed up.
and I was like, I knew. I was like, and you're just lucky you made it to the top.
That's crazy.
It's funny. Well, you were with her for a while before you broke up with her, right? Like,
Yeah, this was like a couple months later.
And when she told you that she like hated you for it, like was that like while you were breaking up, or was that
No.
just like
During the relationship, when
so she
everything was
obviously
crazy.
didn't hate you that
That
much
much,
because
yeah.
she stayed with you.
Yeah,
That's kinda
100%.
funny,
But yeah, it was
That
funny.
makes sense.
So it's become a running joke that like my screener for girls is like take them on Camelback and see what happens. Because I have made other girls mad doing that and like didn't go out with them again because it happened. But yours is kind of funnier. But
That's pretty crazy.
whatever,
Yeah.
man. You gotta do what you gotta do.
Yeah.
But I mean, I think this is probably a pretty good spot to wrap
Yeah.
up. You guys got anything else you want to say in closing before we get out of here?
I think it's just another epic conversation.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, man.
Till
Good
next
stuff.
time.
Can't wait till next time.
Yep.